Hey there, good morning everyone. I'm Errol Barnett in for Vladimir Duthier. At this moment, we're gathering all the big stories happening all over the world at this moment. Here are the newest headlines we're following for you right now. Wall Street has been open for about 30 minutes in today's trading day. We'll discuss how markets are reacting to the president's tariff pause and look at new inflation data incoming this morning. Also, a Russian-American woman now free as part of an apparent prisoner swap between the U.S. and Moscow. We'll bring you details on her case and when she could arrive back in the United States. Also, the death toll surpasses 200 after this roof collapse at a nightclub in the Dominican Republic we've been reporting on. CBS News is in Santo Domingo with a look at ongoing recovery efforts. CBS News 24/7 starts right now. All right, we could see more volatility today. Just take a look at this next to me. This is all following President Trump's pause on his reciprocal tariffs. This is a live look at the New York Stock Exchange. You can already see a 2% drop, pulling back more than 850 points. Trading has only been underway for about 30 minutes. And remember, all of this is after the president's stunning announcement yesterday, where stocks surged to one of its best days in recent years. But that followed days of losses and uncertainty, so ups and downs on U.S. markets. President Trump explained why he called for a temporary pause on tariffs. Listen to this.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done.
CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is back with us, providing more insight into all of this. Kelly, you've been on round the clock. The president said he made the decision because people were too yippy. We did see a spike yesterday. Is there a sense, though, overall, that this reciprocal tariff policy will weigh on any anticipated economic growth?
I think what's going to weigh, at least on the markets, is just the uncertainty. But yes, there is a concern that even though there's a 90-day pause, that we could still see inflation go up, right? I mean, 10% is not nothing, and 125% on China. And then the China of it all, the analysts and economists I'm talking to are saying, like, look, we buy last year, over $400 billion in goods from them. So much of what we consume is made from China. So unless you're able to get that from somewhere else, we are going to see inflation creep up. All of this market volatility, tariff policy going back and forth, it impacts consumer sentiment, and maybe you see consumers spend less. So it's all the what if right now. It's not in the economic data, but that will start to fall out over the next few months.
I think that's why it's important to not just look at yesterday's rebound in Wall Street, but to look at what's happening this morning and the overall picture. You mentioned the consumer spending component. I know that we had some inflation data showing inflation cooled a bit last month, but that doesn't include this episode. So what is the latest information showing us?
Yes, so we got the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and it actually came in well below expectations. It was 2.4%. That's still above the Fed's 2% target that we're looking at. But as you can see on the screen, it's down from 2.8% last month. And already that was a cooling of what we had seen. And so the president, I believe we have this post, reacted on Truth Social saying inflation is down. And he is right. Still means prices are rising, just at a slower rate.
Right. So relative.
I will highlight on the monthly number, prices actually came in down 0.1%. So that actually means overall prices fell a bit. It was mainly because gas prices fell over 6% last month. But as you say, this doesn't include the majority of these tariff impacts. That's going to be over the next few months.
Well, that was my next question.
Right.
When will we see the first data hint from what all of this is costing?
So this does include, the initial tariffs on China going back, the original 10% and the 20%. Right. Includes a little bit of the 25% tariff on autos. But you have to also think about some of these industries stocked up on goods. And so we won't see them raise prices for a couple of months. So I would start to think next month, the month after, and the month after that, kind of going into summer, you might start to see this really all show the impacts of these tariffs.
All right, really important points. Kelly O'Grady, always great to chat with you. Thanks so much. And this morning, the European Union responded to President Trump's shocking tariff U-turn, as you could describe it. You're looking at what the EU president had to say on social media, effectively saying that the bloc will pause retaliatory tariffs for 90 days. So a bit of a wait-and-see moment there. CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio brings us more of the latest from London. Remi, great to see you. We spoke earlier this morning on the CBS Morning News about how there is a domino effect to all of these decisions, but help us understand the EU's position in saying, well, they were going to wait to respond, as they said yesterday, and now they're waiting. They're going to also pause their 90-day response to what the U.S. was doing. Break that down for us.
Sure. Well, tit-for-tat tariffs, now tit-for-tat pauses here. And we know that markets, at least, like the news when it came out earlier today. Right now, the FTSE 100 is up by about 3.5%. The DAX in Germany and the CAC 40 are up by more than 4%, almost 5%. These are the lows of the day, though. But we did see a jump in the markets, in these indices across Europe as they were trading when Ursula von der Leyen posted, as you just posted online on the screen just now, about that EU pause. And we're looking ahead to see what will happen next. She said if negotiations are not satisfactory, then those countermeasures will kick in. And remember, those are roughly 25% tariffs on about $23 billion of U.S. exports to the EU. And also remember, they voted on that just yesterday. 26 of the 27 nations of the EU voted for it, except for Hungary. Viktor Orban not really playing along with the EU on many matters. Incoming German Chancellor Friedrich Merz credited Trump's pause on the EU's retaliations. But basically, EU now saying giving negotiations a chance, but keeping all options on the table. Right now, as it stands, Errol, there is still that baseline Trump tariff of 10% on all imports. That is versus the original Trump tariffs of 20%. So right now, markets, investors, and governments are at least taking that at least a little bit happier.
And I'm curious about the China component of this, Remi, because despite the rallies that we saw in the U.S. and globally yesterday and today, you got these tariffs on China which have increased. And businesses, as we've mentioned, they've got a plan for the long term. So what is the latest on the China component?
Yeah, absolutely. Chinese markets did rise, and we might have expected them to fall with that mind-boggling 125% slap of tariffs on the Chinese markets. But taking a look here, well, for one, you can see the Nikkei and the Kospi, the biggest risers overnight. The Nikkei up by 9%, the Kospi up by nearly 7%, major exporters around the world and to the United States. But if we go and flip up the boards, then we can also take a look at what's happening on Chinese markets. There you are. For example, the Shanghai Composite, 1.3%, 2% for the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. Not as much as the Nikkei and the Kospi, but the rise here on these China markets at least represents some faith and some optimism that China can hold its own against Washington. We already know, we've been reporting that they've been making the currency weaker, the Chinese yuan weaker, and that makes exports going overseas cheaper relative to other currencies like the United States, the US dollar, the British pound. They can also subsidize companies, and they can send money into the stock markets to keep them up. So that's why we see some of this, at least a little bit of positivity on Chinese markets in the overnight trading.
Yeah, and it helps us understand how these decisions impact millions of people around the world. Remi Inocencio reporting from London. Remi, thank you for that. We want to jump over now to CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Willie, good morning to you. Great to see you. Look, where you are right now, there is tons of incoming criticism. The White House being criticized for its timing of these decisions, the messaging around it, what's the real reason, and its coordination of making it happen. So how is President Trump and his advisors, how are they explaining what have been some inconsistencies around this tariff strategy?
Hey there, Errol. Good to be with you. That's right. A lot of inconsistent messaging here coming from this White House earlier in the week. They said that these tariffs were on, that the president wasn't backing down from these tariffs, but we had a reversal, essentially, with the president pausing these tariffs on these reciprocal tariffs, I should say, on most nations. But the economic advisor for the president, Kevin Hassett, tried to explain away or do his best not to explain necessarily, to be exact, fact, the president's response before the markets and before this announcement when he posted on Truth Social that it's a great time to buy. Take a listen to what he said earlier.
Every day is a good day to buy if you believe in the future of America, and every day is a good day to hold as well.
You can confidently say he wasn't trying to control what happened in the market.
He believes in the long run future of America, and I think everybody who sees the clarity, with clarity, how strong these policies are should agree as well.
And we have a statement also from White House spokesman Kush Desai, who also pushed back against this notion that the president was trying to essentially manipulate markets ahead of this announcement that he made yesterday. Part of the statement says it is the responsibility of the president of the United States to reassure the markets and Americans about their economic security in the face of nonstop media fear-mongering. And then the statement goes on to criticize Democrats. But still, Errol, this was a major shift. We've already seen the European Union, as you mentioned previously, respond and pause their reciprocal tariffs. But still, those punishing tariffs on China are still on, some 125% tariff. And the president looking to make a deal not only with China, but other countries around the world as well, Errol.
All right, Willie James Inman with a comprehensive update from the White House position this morning. Great to see you. Thank you for that reporting. And we should note that in just a few minutes, the House is set to vote on a budget resolution bill. This vote was delayed last night because it didn't have enough Republican support. This morning, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he's confident the vote this time will pass.
I'm happy to tell you that this morning I believe we had the votes to finally adopt the budget resolution so we can move forward on President Trump's very important agenda for the American people.
All right, there you have it. CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us live from Capitol Hill, as you see on your screens. Good morning to you, Caitlin. Why is Speaker Johnson more confident today than he was last night?
Hey, Errol, great to be with you. Well, he seems to be closer to getting the needed votes to pass this budget resolution. And here's what happened overnight. You've got a lot of arm twisting going on behind the scenes with Speaker Johnson and his team and President Trump and his team trying to assuage the concerns of some of these House Republicans who are holding their votes so far. Their biggest concern, the issue they have with this bill, is that it doesn't instruct enough spending cuts. And so what happened overnight is that Johnson and Thune got together, and you saw them at the press conference just a few minutes ago. This is the leader of the Senate Republicans and leader of the House Republicans, essentially saying, look, we are pledging to find at least $1.5 trillion in spending cuts once we get through the actual policy. So whether that's enough to assuage some of those who are concerned about not having enough government spending cuts in this bill, we'll find out shortly when they bring this to a vote later this hour. But I also want to remind our viewers what we're talking about here. It's very confusing: budget resolution, tax cuts, all the rest. What this is simply a framework that both chambers had to agree on to start to draft policy related to the president's agenda. So if this passes the House today, that doesn't mean any of the president's agenda items go into law. It's just essentially a way to kickstart the process to start writing legislation. I know that's kind of hard to get your mind around, but it's important because it allows the committees of jurisdiction to start writing policy related to the president's tax cuts, wanting to extend them, issue new tax cuts, potentially, no tax on tips, for example, and other agenda items related to funding for immigration. So if this passes today, it will be a big win for House Republicans, but it doesn't enact any of the president's agenda into law just yet. It essentially just provides the blueprint to go forward with it.
Caitlin, that's a great explanation because it helps viewers understand the difference between the headline and what will be happening behind the scenes. So before we let you go, help us understand what the next step would be then, because the House and Senate are trying to kind of have a budget resolution on this bill. That's a framework. President Trump, though, is saying there's also going to be tax cuts. That means less money coming into the government. So how will they make sense of the framework to deliver on these campaign pledges?
Well, Errol, that's a great point, because as hard as it is to just get a simple budget resolution, a framework passed through Congress, after that passes, now the really hard work begins, because the committees have to go through and write policy, and then that all has to be put together and voted on. And so you have this group of holdouts. They're going to continue to be putting the pressure on House Republican leaders to enact those spending cuts that they've promised. As you mentioned, spending cuts have to come from somewhere. And in this budget resolution, for example, they instruct the committees to find trillions of dollars in cuts. Where does that come from? There are questions about whether they will have to cut into programs like Medicaid and other items. So nothing is written yet, nothing is into law yet, but that is really where the sticking points begin. The hard work begins after this vote passes.
All right, and we'll see if indeed the vote does pass. Voting, I believe, underway or set to get underway here soon. Caitlin, Huey, Burns, we'll reconnect with you if there's an update this hour. Thank you so much. All right, we also want to bring you the latest on this story. Russia has freed a dual U.S.-Russian citizen this morning as part of an apparent prisoner swap with Moscow. Ksenia Karolina, who had been detained for more than a year and convicted of treason, is now in U.S. care, according to her lawyer. In return, the U.S. reportedly handed over a German-Russian man who'd been jailed on smuggling charges. Secretary of State Marco Rubio posted that Karolina was wrongfully detained by Russia and that President Trump will keep working to release all Americans. Earlier, I spoke with Washington Post reporter Mary Alushina about Karolina's release.
She was detained, as far as we know, from Russian officials when she was trying to visit her family in Russia at the border. The guards checked her phone. They found a small donation to a Ukrainian fund, and that was enough to start a case against her for treason because she's a dual Russian-U.S. national, and she was sentenced to 12 years in prison. She was one of the remaining Americans in Russian custody. And now she's been released, and in return, Russia got Artur Petrov, who is a dual German-Russian national. He was detained in 2023 in Cyprus for allegedly exporting microelectronics that were of dual military purpose. And that was sort of the result of the swap, and that's the second swap we've seen between Russia and the U.S. under Trump. As we know, Mark Fogel, a U.S. teacher, has been released several weeks ago as well. That's like a second high-profile swap the two countries have seen.
And we're not sure at this moment what Karolina's destination is. If it includes a visit to the White House, we'll keep you updated on this story as it develops. All right, hope is fading at this moment in the Dominican Republic. Crews there have ended the search for survivors. At the moment, they're focused on recovery efforts in that deadly nightclub roof collapse. We're on the ground in Santo Domingo after the break. Stay right there. This is CBS News 24/7. So the death toll from the roof collapse at a nightclub in the Dominican Republic has now surpassed 200. Rescue workers continue to remove rubble from Tuesday's collapse in Santo Domingo. There does not appear to be any hope of finding survivors now. CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides continues to report from the scene. Christian, what are you seeing today? A real shift in mood, I imagine.
Yeah, of course. I mean, at this point, this being a recovery mission now, so many of those family members that were holding on to hope, those hopes have been dashed. We need to get a look at just some of the rescue personnel that have been out here, and they've been doing all the work throughout the past couple of days. Some of them are going to be leaving now that this has turned into a recovery mission. This is sort of the staging area that's located right next to the Jet Set nightclub, where that search at this point now to recover the bodies of the victims is currently ongoing. It's a difficult time. Many family members that were here yesterday, you'll recall that there were hundreds of people who were here. At this point, those folks have now gone to the local morgue. That is where they're currently moving the bodies that are found here for people to identify them.
And Christian, I think that there's no clear indication of why this happened so suddenly. How are relatives of victims even coping with that lack of information at this point?
Right. There are so many questions about how this could have happened and whether a fire that took place here years ago may have had something to do with the structural integrity of the building. We've spoken to a number of family members. Let's take a listen to what one person told me. She's been waiting to hear news about her father.
My dad is my hero. Like, I can't live without him. Sorry. He was really important to me, and I'm not prepared for anything that isn't hugging him right now.
It's just absolutely heartbreaking. We spoke to some other families who have been waiting to hear news about their loved ones. They say that these recovery efforts, because the crews are moving quicker to try to find the bodies, have sort of been successful at that. One family already knows that their family members were found, and unfortunately they were found dead, buried underneath the rubble. Unclear how many more people could still be buried.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Christian, we appreciate your ongoing reporting there. Thank you very much. All right, we now want to bring you this. An Idaho police department is facing backlash after the shooting of a 17-year-old wielding a knife. Victor Perez, who is living with autism and has cerebral palsy, is fighting for his life right now in the hospital after being shot 9 times, according to his family. CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez is following the investigation, which has just begun. Andres, this sounds so strange. What happened?
Well, Errol, right now, police aren't saying much, and that is upsetting the community out here. They did held a brief news conference on Monday in which they said that on Saturday afternoon, the Pocatello Police Department received a call of a fight outside this home, an intoxicated individual holding a knife. However, the family of 17-year-old Victor Perez says that he is nonverbal, he is autistic, and wasn't threatening anyone. All they were trying to do is get that knife out of his hand. However, in that video that has now gone viral, you could see the officers showing up. They lined themselves up around this steel fence here. Perez on the opposite side there on the ground. As soon as he starts standing up and heading towards officers unleash their gunfire 9 times. In a statement, the Pocatello Police Department said that we understand the concern and emotion surrounding the officer-involved shooting that occurred. We are also aware of the video circulating online, which only shows one angle. The full picture requires careful review of all the facts and evidence. Now, we have put in a request to do a sit-down interview with the police chief to understand the scope of their investigation and the circumstances of what happened here, but we still haven't heard back from him yet.
And Andres, what sounds so jarring about this is he allegedly had a knife. They responded by shooting 9 times. There is such a thing as non-lethal force that police can use in these situations. I'm sure that's among the many questions that the community has and the family of this young man as well.
It certainly is. In fact, that is one of the big questions that the community has. Why couldn't they use beanbag rounds? Why couldn't they have used a taser in this case? Could they have taken the time to assess the situation? Those officers only took 12 seconds from the moment that they got out of their vehicles to the time they lined up to open fire on this teenager. So a lot of questions surrounding, what could have been done in hindsight. Those have obviously that's all part of the investigation. Right now, the priority for the family, of course, is the well-being of Victor. He's currently at the hospital, still remains in a coma. They had to amputate his left leg because of the injuries he sustained here. The community is rallying around the family. They're holding a candlelight vigil for him as well as a fundraiser this Saturday outside the hospital. They have also been calling for accountability. They held a protest outside the police station on Sunday, and then his aunt told us this.
I know the position of the police, but only one can at least stop him. If you have to shoot, okay, only one. But what the heck, what was that? 9 bullets. They took 9 bullets out of that kid.
Here is that the relatives of Perez who were out here with him with all this happened, limited English here. So the other question is whether there was a language barrier between the officers and those individuals out here. So all of these questions need to be answered. We're going to try to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, so many layers to that story. Andres Gutierrez, great to have you there on the ground speaking with people impacted. Thank you very much. We'll stay close. Now to some other stories. While some tariffs may have been paused, the tariff in place on China, that could affect home construction here in the U.S. Coming up, we'll hear from the CEO of the National Association of Home Builders. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you at this moment. Ukraine says more than 150 Chinese nationals are fighting with Russia's military. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky alleges Moscow was using social media to recruit mercenaries from China. Earlier this week, Zelensky said his forces had captured 2 men from China caught fighting alongside Russian forces. Beijing has dismissed Ukraine's latest claims as groundless and said it was seeking to verify the situation. The final ground rules are nearly set for the trial over the University of Idaho murders. Lawyers for accused killer Brian Kohberger argued with prosecutors in court yesterday over what evidence can be used. They discussed dozens of items from the alleged weapon to how the alleged killer can and cannot be described. Jury selection may begin in July with a trial potentially in August. If convicted, Kohberger could face the death penalty. And a Meta whistleblower claims that Facebook executives undermined U.S. national security and worked, quote, hand in glove with China to censor posts. Facebook's former director of global public policy testified on Capitol Hill yesterday, and she claims that Meta briefed the Chinese Communist Party on critical emerging technologies, including AI. She alleges the company allowed China to access American user data. A Meta spokesperson called her testimony divorced from reality and riddled with false claims. All right, Asian stock markets rallied today following President Trump's reciprocal tariff pause, even in China, where the president actually raised levies above 100%. CBS News foreign correspondent Anna Corrin brings us the latest from Hong Kong.
With the trade war entering a new phase, Asian stock markets responded positively to President Trump's abrupt decision to pause tariffs on most countries except China. Japan and South Korea rebounded strongly on Thursday, while Hong Kong and China made a modest recovery. Well, despite this, all these markets are down on where they finished last week before the escalation of the trade war. Well, late Wednesday, China hit back at the US's 104% tariffs, imposing their own rate of 84%. President Trump went even further, taking the tariff rate to 125%, effectively limiting trade between the world's 2 largest economies. While the situation has escalated, there is a general consensus this game of tit for tat cannot continue indefinitely, with some analysts saying the situation could change on a dime if either side gives ground. On Thursday, the Chinese Commerce Ministry's tone appeared to have softened slightly from earlier in the week, saying, quote, "We hope the US will meet China halfway and based on the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation, properly resolve differences through dialogue and consultation." While markets have recovered some ground, volatility remains elevated and is likely to stay that way until the US and China begin to take steps forward towards finding some sort of resolution. Anna Corrin, CBS News, Hong Kong.
All right, Anna, thank you for that. The Trump administration may have paused most tariffs, but the levies placed on China could hit U.S. home building. The CEO of the National Association of Home Builders joined the Daily Report last night to talk about the expected added costs.
Well, at first, we were glad to see the 90-day pause on those broader tariffs, but we did see that increase on Chinese tariffs, and with China being the largest supplier of building materials for us, there is going to be an impact. So we're expecting to see prices rise for those materials that come from China, and even those that may come from other countries that still have that base 10% tariff on it. So we're anticipating higher material prices, which are either going to be absorbed by the builder or more likely they're going to be passed along to the consumer.
All right, now we want to bring you news surrounding the Justice Department. Federal judges in both New York and Texas have blocked the deportations of a group of Venezuelan men under the Alien Enemies Act. The temporary halt comes after the Supreme Court cleared the way for deportations of alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang this week. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman joins me here in Studio 57 with more on this and some other big legal headlines out of the DOJ. Katrina, great to see you as always. Explain first these temporary orders and how it might impact some of the government's efforts to deport people in the future.
Yeah. Good morning, Errol. So, yes, judges in both Texas and New York issued these temporary restraining orders. I was in the courtroom in New York yesterday, and that judge has specifically said that there needs to be notice who's given to these people who could be impacted by the Alien Enemies Act proclamation. But they're also specific because the Supreme Court has said that people have to file these cases where they're confined. So in New York, it only applies to the Southern District of New York. In Texas, it only applies to this detention center. Venezuelans from there cannot be deported. But in New York, the judge also specifically said that there has to be notice and that notice has to be given in English and Spanish, which was something that was very important to the ACLU attorney yesterday. He says a lot of these individuals don't speak English. If they got notice in English, they might not actually understand what's happening to them. The judge also said when there's a hearing, there has to be an interpreter there. So these are very important things. In addition, he certified a class. So rather than just be about the plaintiffs who are currently held in New York, these two men that brought that case, it applies to anyone in the Southern District who could be impacted by the proclamation. They're both temporary, but for now, it will be the status for the people who are in these certain areas. And in terms of other cases across the country, we might have to see those pop up in their individual districts if the lawyers can't find a way to get a nationwide injunction on this, Errol.
Wow, a lot there. Now, I also want to ask you about the Department of Justice now wanting to drop charges against an accused leader of the East Coast gang MS-13. This is a complete reversal of their position from a short time ago. So how exactly are they explaining this effort to drop charges?
Well, for one, Errol, this is highly unusual because the DOJ wants to drop charges and the defendant wants to keep the charges. His lawyer has filed asking for the court to move forward with this case because they say the DOJ wants to drop these charges and will immediately put him into ICE custody. He'll be at risk of being deported to the Socote prison in El Salvador, where it could be very dangerous for him. The DOJ, they also said, has just made such a big deal about the fact that they arrested this alleged leader of the MS-13 gang. And what sources have told CBS is normally we would want to prosecute someone like that and get a conviction to make sure that they could not be let back into this country. But for now, we have this very topsy-turvy situation where the government wants the case dropped, the defendant wants the case to move forward, and there's going to be a hearing that was just set for next Tuesday on this.
Okay, so we'll watch closely next Tuesday for the next development on that case. So many threads you're pulling and following. Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to see you. All right, floodwaters are slowly receding out in Tennessee after it was hit with multiple strong storms last week. More rain and thunderstorms are expected to hit parts of the state today. So let's take a quick look out the window at your national weather forecast. CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore can show us how different conditions are, Grant, from coast to coast right now.
East Coast, West Coast, I mean, it's two different seasons, Errol, because we're still talking about chilly conditions and, like you mentioned, rain over portions of the east where, yeah, it's falling in places where they're just saying, look, we don't need a drop of rain. We still have several flood warnings in effect from the Ohio Valley down into the Mississippi Valley as all that water slowly runs off into the Gulf of Mexico. About 5.5 to 6 million people still underneath some sort of flash flood warning or flood warning, as the case would be for some. All right, let's drop the map here. Let me show you what we have there in terms of our rain that's still falling across the country. There's the map going to come, and maybe there it is. All right. So, yeah, tracking some showers moving through portions of the Tennessee Valley up into the Midwestern states, and the cold air that's in place across the eastern half of the United States producing some snow over Lake Erie, and that's moving into the north and east. We will drop this, and we are still tracking the threat for some severe weather a little farther to the south as we get into the heating of the day later on this afternoon. A slight risk for some severe storms to develop as we head toward the evening hours. But this whole storm system will advance to the east, and it actually taps into a little more energy as we head into the day tomorrow, and that will track up the East Coast, and that's where we could see the threat for at least some moderate flooding tomorrow afternoon. It's not a huge threat, but some places could pick up 2 to maybe 3 inches of rainfall. And when that falls over a relatively short period of time, that may result in some flash flooding. That'll be something to keep an eye on across the mid-Atlantic as we go into tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. As I mentioned, there from the south all the way up to the mid-Atlantic, some places are going to see a decent amount of rainfall over, areas that do need some rain with some ongoing drought conditions. But the contrast in temperatures from the East Coast, Detroit looking at high temperatures today at 41 degrees. That's 14 degrees colder than normal. Look at Albuquerque, 83 this afternoon, 16 degrees warmer than normal. Watch as we go through the next couple of days. That cooler air stays in place over the East Coast. Detroit's at 50 tomorrow. New York's at 50, running 10 to nearly 15 degrees cooler than normal. Louisville is at 55 degrees tomorrow afternoon. Meanwhile, you've got the heat back over the desert Southwest. In fact, Phoenix, not shown here, is looking at temperatures reaching into the triple digits over the next several afternoons. That cooler air will continue to advance to the east. New York's only at 46 degrees on Saturday. As we go through the weekend, though, that cooler air hangs on to the east, but you can see how it slowly begins to propagate to the east. Kansas City looking at high temperatures Sunday afternoon at 84. Errol, that's nearly 20 degrees warmer than normal. Back to you.
Wow, it's barely spring in the northeast and already summer in the southwest, according to those temperatures.
Right.
We'll see you again before the end of the hour, Grant. Thanks very much. All right, welcome back, folks. Take a look at this. It's a live look at the House chamber. They're voting at this moment on the GOP budget resolution we've been discussing, endorsed by President Trump. This was meant to happen last night, but was scrubbed as lawmakers worked into the night to, as our Caitlin Huey-Burns described, twist some arms and convince a number of Republican holdouts to vote for this plan. It is considered key to the president's agenda. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said the Senate is aligned with the House. And the House and Senate were pushing separate blueprints earlier this year, but recently reached a compromise, which the Senate adopted early Saturday morning. So we'll keep watching this for you. Pope Francis met privately with King Charles III and Queen Camilla yesterday. The couple is celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Has it been 20 years already? And they're on a 4-day state visit to Italy. The Vatican released an image of their meeting. The pontiff, who continues to recover from a bout of double pneumonia, wished the royal couple a happy anniversary and King Charles a speedy recovery. As you know, he's undergoing cancer treatment. Buckingham Palace said the king and queen were delighted the Pope was well enough to host them. Welcome back. A celebrity dog from California is inspiring people to adopt shelter animals, and his owners hope his story will lead to tougher penalties for animal abuse. CBS News Sacramento reporter Marley Ginter has this story.
The city of Elk Grove honoring a pup with a purpose.
Ethan's story reminds us of every animal deserves love, care, and the opportunity to thrive.
Ethan, a 4-year-old Prisa Canario, is traveling the country, raising awareness about animal abuse.
He brings joy everywhere he goes.
And this is for you. Elk Grove's mayor presented Ethan with a special proclamation at the city council meeting Wednesday night. In 2019, Ethan was found abandoned outside a Kentucky animal shelter, 50 pounds underweight, dehydrated, and near death.
When the person found him and they brought him in to the vet area, they thought he was dead, and then he took a breath.
Vets were able to nurse him back to life, and he was adopted by Jeff and Dana Calloway.
When we come to things like this, it's like Ethan kind of knows his purpose and his mission.
A mission that now includes meeting with lawmakers to strengthen protections against animal cruelty Kentucky recently passed Ethan's law, which increases the penalty for animal abuse to a felony.
Now that that law is passed, our job now becomes to give a name to all those other cats and dogs that have been abused.
Ethan's tale is also inspiring people to adopt shelter pets.
When you see him in person and you see the love he radiates, it's really been amazing.
Ethan's journey has been shared on social media, where he has 44,000 Facebook followers.
There's so many people that have a personal connection with him that have never met him.
The American Humane Society even named this good boy an American hero dog in 2022.
People are always happy to see him, and he seems to enjoy all of it.
Great story. We love dogs. All right, Lakers star LeBron James is adding to his already impressive resume. He's now the first professional male athlete to be depicted as a Ken doll. Mattel unveiled this doll yesterday, kicking off its Ken-Ambassador series, which aims to provide role models for the next generation of athletes. The toy, as you see here, is decked out in Letterman's jacket with James's initials, even has his headphones, and it has some cool sunglasses as well as that nice cap. It will cost $75 and goes on sale Monday. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at your national forecast. Grant, will it have LeBron's bald spot, do you think?
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. It depends on what LeBron. Are we getting the young early LeBron? Or are we getting the later one? I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a great idea though. So either way, I think I fully support that. Let's talk about the forecast, guys. Before we let you go, got some rain moving through the East Coast, even some snow up toward the Northeast. Second round of some winter weather sneaking its way into the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes states. We'll see a lot more rain on the way for the East Coast as we go through the next couple of days, and that's going to be the pattern. Cool and wet across the east, dry and mild conditions. I mean, this is beautiful spring-like, if not almost summer-like weather from the western Gulf states all the way through the high plains into the Great Basin. Looking at temperatures in Denver today at 69 degrees. We've got triple-digit heat, Errol, in Phoenix today. Highs right at 100 degrees. Back to you.
Yeah, it is wild out there. Grant, thanks so much. Always great to connect with you. I believe I'll see you here tomorrow. That does it for me today. I'll see you on the CBS Morning News at 7 a.m. But stay right where you are after the break. Mugo Odigwe is live from San Francisco with all your breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.